for the opportunity to present my paper. So I'm usually not used to read, but just because I have 10 minutes and I measured it, so I will have to read, and I hope I will read it clearly. The title of my presentation is Reconciliation is a Marathon and Not a Sprint. I like to compare education to the relentless growth of the roots of any tree. Once these roots are deeply entrenched in the soil, they continue to spread out, and the attempts to eradicate the poisonous and harmful ones become exceedingly challenging. Therefore, one of the pivotal challenges in education, be it in the private, public, or political sphere, is to establish roots of foundations of care and trust despite the poisonous forces that govern our minds and hearts and eventually our epistemology. It is an ongoing marathon and not a sprint. I just want to make a pause. If you don't understand, if something is not clear, please let me know. I'm a little bit nervous and excited. The question is, okay, thank you. The question is how to transcend the oppressive epistemology that governs us and obstructs peace between Israelis and Palestinians. I propose education that emanates from inclusive caring and an ethno-philosophical pedagogy as a compass. This lecture does not aim to present an ultimate solution or an ideal venture. Instead, it seeks to inspire the imagination to envision an emancipatory horizon through inclusive caring, where reconciliation becomes the guiding principle of political education. Much like a never-ending marathon, education transcends generations and is therefore challenging to contest. Hence, the process of reconciling conflicts necessitates the creation of conditions built on trust and empathy, fostering open, flexible, and essentially conflictual discussions with all involved parties, be it individuals or collectives. The process of deconstructing and reconstructing our knowledge based on ethos and myths is crucial to establish a careful, emotional, and caring rapport with others. It is comparable to the challenge of learning a new language. It necessitates the cultivation of different habits of critical thinking and feeling, of perceiving safety and security in terms of human kindness that entails humanization of the formidable other beyond the strict framework that governs our consciousness. It means to speak in terms of inclusive caring. The standpoint of caring emphasizes the realization that human beings are like one big web, and hence any rupture at one end affects the entire web. We are inherently entangled and interlocked in interactions and relationships, grappling with ways to approach them. The caring approach has subversive elements of epistemological resistance to hegemonic, conservative patriarchy, because in the aesthetic dimension, caring is perceived as soft and stereotypically feminine, and hence not as a threat to the power structure. Motivated by a caring approach means having the courage and strength to resist the dissemination of hatred and fear towards the intimidating and alienated other. These fears serve as the raison d'etre of the hostile forces that communicate in violent and militant terms. These forces are apprehensive that a rhetoric of respect for human beings, as we see it nowadays in Israel, which recognizes a wide range of intersecting identities, will lead to the establishment of an inclusive democracy. And I don't say liberal democracy, I say inclusive democracy. The nature of the Israeli-Jewish-Palestinian conflict, as dictated by the ruling classes, is characterized, in my opinion, by two subservient nations: the geopolitical occupation and the pursuit of self-determination serve as a political apparatus for the oppressive and violent patriarchy on both sides, offering false promises of independence and sovereignty. It is, however, an occupation of the mind and heart through governing our cognitive emotional habits. From the Israeli Jewish perspective, the fear of extinction and another Holocaust, along with the threat posed by the daunting other, is a paramount curriculum. Rote citation of narrow-dimensional indoctrinated interpretation of Judaism and the Jewish history of persecutions eclipse genuine critical and counterintuitive thinking. For example, on Passover Eve, we the Jews think that every generation faces persecution that aim to annihilate us. Jewish education, whether Orthodox, secular, or else, it doesn't matter, is thus based on existential fears and the fear of God as well. It doesn't matter if you're secular or not. Fear is constantly imminent and hence also a political apparatus to justify Jewish, Orthodox, ultra conservative patriarchal supremacy, racism, and sexism that compromise democracy. However, this ideology benefits all parties involved, including the Palestinians. The domineering rulers of the Palestinians and the Israeli sides of all sides benefit from the external and internal hostile forces and profit from the conflict. Hence, they attempt to maintain a low key and volatile conflict serving their interests. All sides, in particular Israeli sides, are led by weak patriarchal rulers driven by toxic masculinity, and it's so evident in Israeli politics nowadays. And grassroots organizations such as the Parents Circle Families Forum and the like are considered a threat by the Israeli and Palestinian rulers. The vehement objection to such humanitarian initiatives, which seek to humanize each other despite personal tragedies, unfolds the racist and sexist rulers' lack of interest in reaching neither an agreement nor reconciliation. The human encounter, whether direct or indirect, that questions the perception of the other as the threatening collective, as perpetuated by the oppressive ruling classes, is core to the infrastructure for reconciliation. This fosters epistemological resistance and consequently allows for a different acquaintance with the other from a humane angle, which is a great threat to any rulership. It is accompanied by empathy for existential concerns and fears, which eventually leads to mutual bonding. The conclusive thoughts with hope. I must be hopeful. It is inevitable and vital. Deconstructing the deep-rooted habits of fear, which justify and legitimize the oppression of the formidable other, is feasible. It is like pieces of a mosaic requiring reorganization and reconstruction of our ingrained knowledge. While it cannot be absolute, I don't think it is, and should retain its conflictual nature, it can serve as the infrastructure for education that frees us from the shackles of violence. It's not absolute, of course. Such an approach is compared to a marathon that yields fruits that are manifested in younger generation. It's a compass. Listening, and the last paragraph, listening to the inspiring youth and the younger generation in the current judicial reform demonstrations teaches us, the older generation that aspires for peace and security, that readiness for reconciliation requires patience and an epistemological change of our ingrained cognitive and emotional habits by resistant patriarchal hegemony. This is why it is a marathon and not a sprint. And despite the hostile vibe, there has been an ongoing reconciliation among the people of either side on the surface for decades. For decades, there are so many interactions, beautiful ones. And when the day comes, because of the people's courage to resist hatred and to bond, these foundations will enable peace in Congress with reconciliation. Thank you. It was a sprint of 10 minutes.